Hello and welcome to the Discover History YouTube channel, and today I'm going to be talking about medieval Worcester. Now, we have a lot of requests and we love requests. Keep sending them in. The two popular requests that we get are cookery demonstrations, which Helen has been helping you with. The other one is local history. We're based in Worcester, so local history to us is all about the city of Worcester. And today I want to talk to you about medieval Worcester because if you look at the history of a city, it often has peaks and troughs, it goes up and down. And if you go back in history, the medieval period is probably when Worcester is at its peak. Worcester is making a huge amount of money from wool, and we are really the centre of Britain. If you look at where we are in the Midlands, we're south of Birmingham and north of Gloucester. We're slap bang in the middle, and we're on the longest river in Britain, the River Severn. So medieval Worcester, what did it look like? Well, this is a map that we use when we do a guided tour. After the COVID-19 lockdown, please do book on one of our walking tours. Some of them are age specific, like a medieval tour of Worcester, a Tudor tour of Worcester. Other ones are actually a bit more quirky. Old pubs of Worcester, that's a very popular one. And a ghost walk of Worcester. We do lots and lots, 36 different tours. Anyway, that's medieval Worcester. This is a map that I drew up some years ago. I even got my crayons out and coloured it in. And it gives you an idea of what Worcester looked like in the 13th century. Just to give you a bit of a background, if you look at the geography of the area, the highest point is actually down here where Worcester Cathedral is. Whenever you walk along the riverside down here, you have to look up. The cathedral is on a huge mound. That is the highest point within the city. If you look at the area of Foregate Street Station, it's much lower. So if you ever come out of the station and walk along the high street, which is actually the old Roman road up to the cathedral, you're actually going up a hill. Now, there was marshland around Worcester. We know there was a lot of marshland because descriptions of people coming to the city over the old bridge, not where it is today, by the way. It actually used to stand between what is now the modern bridge down here and the railway viaduct here. But when people came in the city over the old medieval bridge, they used to have to walk on a causeway because it was quite marshy in this area. We also know it was pretty marshy to the south and also around to the east, which actually gives Worcester this strange shape, as I often say, either a very shallow B or just a capital D. So it's quite marshy, but this area is stable enough and high enough not to flood, and also stable enough and high enough to live on for not just protection purposes, but also to keep us nice and dry. Now, by the 13th century, Worcester had a sandstone wall going all the way around the outside. Worcester's always been a walled city. If you go back to the Bronze Age, 700, 750 BC, the settlement that occupied this point here, where the cathedral now sits, that was walled. There was a palisade going around it. The Romans also put a defensive feature around it. The Anglo-Saxons did the same. So we've always had a wall around it. And if you have a look at the coat of arms for Worcester, it's red and black quartered with a castle in the middle. There is a three-paired coat of arms, but not in the medieval period. But the interesting thing is that coat of arms displays the fact that we are a walled city. Now, by around about 1250, the sandstone wall was completely circling the city. There was only one little gap, and that was down here, and that was the quay side. And even today, that area is still known as South Quay. That gap was to allow trade, and that was so important. Worcester is on the longest river in Britain. We had a lot of ships going up and down, heading south down into the Bristol Channel, or ships coming up from the Bristol Channel, stopping off at places like Bristol and Gloucester. So we need that opening just to there. Worcester was famous. Worcester was making money not from Worcestershire sauce or from bone china like later in history. We were producing and exporting vast quantities of wool from here. Any dry fields around the city was taken up by pasture land, land where the sheep could graze, and then the sheep were sheared and the wool made its way within the city walls, where most people at the time were weavers, carders, dyers, fullers, and so on. But if you entered the city, you would have had to have entered through one of the many gates. Now, at one point there were 6 gates. At one point there were 8 gates. But we definitely know there was 4 main gates. If you came from the north, you would have come down the old Roman road and entered through Foregate, or Forest Gate as it was sometimes called. This gate would have led from the north area down the high street to the cathedral Lich Gate, for example, the Death Gate, the Corpse Gate, which would have led you into the cathedral precinct. That gate, no longer there, like all the other gates no longer there. That stood pretty much where the Butts is in Worcester, and if you know where Foregate Street Station, that roundabout area was where the North Gate stood. We also had a South Gate, and the South Gate stood slightly offset from Worcester Cathedral, and that was Sidbury Gate, which gets its name from the South Burg, or the old word, the South Defence. So that is Sidbury Gate. That stands pretty much where the canal now stands. The commandery, for example, the old medieval hospital, in fact, stood just outside that gate. Sidbury, the South Gate. To the west, we had Bridgegate, and the reason why it was called Bridgegate is the fact that the bridge was beyond the bridge gate. You would have gone through the bridge gate and out across the bridge. Interesting fact, if you ever go to Worcester when the lockdown is removed, if you ever go to St John's, for example, this side of the river, we have a street known as Tybridge Street. Well, Tybridge Street would have gone straight across the bridge and you would have ended up in Newport Street. It's not that same alignment anymore. Bit of advice, get yourself a modern map. Have a look at an aerial photograph on Google Maps and you will actually see where the alignment should be between Tybridge Street and Newport Street. So that's the west gate that led across the bridge. At one point, that side of the river was often remarked as being the Welsh side. Some people still say it is today. The only problem is we do have the Malvern Hills and also Herefordshire in the way between England and Wales. We're not that far away, however. But we also have the East Gate, and the East Gate was known as St Martin's Gate, named after the parish of St Martin's, which it sits under. And St Martin's Gate now is very much the Cornmarket area. So we have the North Gate, the South Gate, the West Gate, and the East Gate. And as you can see within the city, we have a lot of houses, and Worcester had a lot of houses, and amazingly we still have a few even today. This is of Friar Street, and we all know which house this is running along there. That is the National Trust property, the Greyfriars, and it has nothing to do with the friary, the Franciscan friary that was there, but it is a medieval building. It's a building that was built in the 15th century, so it's still a medieval building that's still standing within the city of Worcester. But when we look at medieval Worcester, it's made up of 3 parts really. We have the city of Worcester, which I've just showed you a little glimpse of with Friar Street and Greyfriars. We also have the magnificent and most iconic Worcester Cathedral. There it is there, standing in its all its glory in a perfectly blue summery sky. And what we're looking at now is pretty much how it looked in the latter part of the Middle Ages. In the early part it was made of timber, it was even whitewashed at one point. But Worcester is made of the citizens, the city of Worcester, the church, the mother church being Worcester Cathedral. And the other thing that we very rarely mention, so we've got the city of Worcester, the church, is this thing here to the south, right on the bend of the River Severn. And that is actually the Worcester Motte and Bailey Castle. Yes, Worcester did have a castle. That is the view of the castle site today. And it's actually the garden, the memorial garden of Worcester King's School. You would have saw a huge mound of earth here, a motte, with the turret on top being the castle, the Motte and Bailey Castle. So Worcester was a very important place. We're actually very high up. We were almost the 7th largest city in Britain in the Middle Ages, making a huge amount of money from wool. And like I said, made up of the castle, the defence, the cathedral, the church, and the citizens, the city of Worcester. Worcester in medieval times, I would have loved to have visited it. It would have had a distinct smell about it, but it would have been a great place to visit. Hopefully that's given you a little introduction of medieval Worcester. Now, the second reason for making this video was because tomorrow, Easter Sunday, we want you to have a go at a craft. Now, we're not going to tell you what the craft is, but these are the objects that you need to do that craft. You are going to require some scissors, a pen, some glue, any description, stronger glue the better. You need a sheet of paper. I've chosen parchment paper. If you've got parchment paper, use it, or you could take normal paper and maybe age it with some tea or coffee. You also need an old plastic wallet, an old one that you don't mind cutting up, and some cardboard. So tomorrow, round about 12 o'clock, I want you to have your cardboard, your plastic envelope, some paper, pen, glue and scissors to hand, and we're going to do a craft. It's a craft that will eventually get you to make something that looks like an object Tudor school children had. Anyway, go and collect those items and we'll see you tomorrow. Stay safe. Bye.